Charles Lucky Luciano, the number one gangster of all times. Intelligent, ruthless, and a visionary. Born Salvatore Luciane, was born in Sicily, Italy. Immigrated to the United States in 1906 at the age of 8. He settled in New York City, Manhattan, Lower East Side, a popular destination for Italian immigrants during the period. At age 14, Luciano dropped out of school and started a job delivering hats, earning $7 per week. As a teenager, Luciano started his own gang and became a member of the old 5 Point Gang. Unlike other street gangs whose business was petty crime, Luciano offered protection to Jewish youngsters from Italian and Irish gangs. For 10 cents per week, he began learning the pimping trade in the years around World War I. Luciano met the infamous Meyer Lansky as a teenager when Luciano attempted to extort Lansky for protection money on his walk home from school. Luciano respected the younger boy due to his response to his threats, and the two formed a lasting partnership. On January the 17th, 1920, the 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution took effect and prohibition was enforced for the next 13 years. The amendment prohibited the manufacture, sale, and transport of alcohol beverages. Since the demand for alcohol continued, the resulting black market for alcohol beverages provided criminals with an additional source of income. By 1920, Luciano had met many future mafia leaders, including Vito, Frank Costello, the latter a longtime friend and future business partner, through the 5 Points Gang. That same year, Lower Manhattan crime boss Joe the Boss recruited Luciano as one of his gunmen. Around that same time, Luciano and his close associates started working for gambler Arnold the Brain Rothstein, who immediately saw the potential financial windfall and educated Luciano on running bootleg alcohol as a business. Luciano, Costello, and the Convinci started their own bootlegging operation with financing from Rothstein, the Brain. Rothstein served as a mentor for Luciano. Among other things, he taught him how to move in high society and to dress. Rothstein employed Jack Leg Diamonds as a bodyguard and enforcer. Luciano often worked with Legs. He started selling heroin smuggling in from Montreal. In 1923, Luciano was caught in a sting selling heroin to undercover agents. Although he saw no jail time, being outed as a drug peddler damaged his reputation among his high class associates and customers. To salvage his reputation, Luciano bought 200 expensive seats to the Jack Dempsey Louis Firpo boxing match in the Bronx and distributed them to two gangsters and politicians. Rothstein took Luciano on a shopping trip to Wanamaker's department store in Manhattan to buy clothing for the fight. The strategy worked, and Luciano's reputation was saved. By 1925, Luciano was grossing over $12 million per year and made a personal income of about $4 million per year from running illegal gambling and bootlegging operations in New York that also extended into Philadelphia. Luciano soon became a top aide in the Boss Criminals organization. In contrast to Rothstein, the Boss was uneducated with poor manners and limited managerial skills. By the late 1920s, his main rival was Sicily-born boss Salvatore Little Caesar. After one of the boss's lieutenants switched sides to be with Little Caesar, the boss ordered Luciano to arrange the lieutenant's murder. After the murder took place on February the 26th, 1930, the rivalry between the boss and Little Caesar escalated into the bloodiest bloodbath war ever. Little Caesar and the boss were older traditional mafia bosses who had started their criminal career in Italy. They believed in upholding the supposed old world mafia principles of honor, tradition, respect, and dignity. These bosses refused to work with non-Italians and were skeptical of working with non-Sicilians. Some of the most conservative bosses worked with only those men with roots in their own Sicilian village. In contrast, Luciano was willing to work with not only Italians, but also Jewish and Irish and African American gangsters, as long as there was money to be made. Luciano was shocked to hear traditional Sicilians lecture him about his dealings with close friend Costello, whom they called the Dirty. But Luciano soon began cultivating ties with other young mobsters, but began their criminal careers in the U.S. and chafed after their boss's conservatism. Luciano wanted to use lessons he learned from Rothstein to turn their gang activities into full-blown criminal enterprises. As the war progressed, this group came to include further boss leaders, such as the Convincis, Albert Anastasia, Joe Adonis, Joe Bonanno, also known as Joe Bananas, Carlo Gambino, Joe Perfisi, Tommy Gadalino, and Tommy Three Finger Brown. They believed that their bosses' greed and were keeping them poor, while the Irish and the Jewish and the African American gangs got rich. Luciano's visions was to form a national crime syndicate in which the Italians, Jewish, Irish, and African American gangs could pool their resources and turn organized crime into a lucrative business for all. An organization he founded after a conference was hosted in Atlantic City by Luciano, Lansky, Costello, and Johnny Taro in May 1929. Luciano was forced into a limousine at gunpoint by three men, beaten and stabbed, and strung up by his hands from a beam in a warehouse in Staten Island. He survived the ordeal, but was forever marked with a scar and a droopy eye. The identity of his abductors was never established. When picked up by the police after the assault, Luciano said that he had no idea who did it. In 1953, Luciano told an interviewer that it was the police who kidnapped and beat him in an attempt to find Jack Legs Diamond. Another story was that Little Caesar ordered the attack. By early 1931, The war had turned against the boss, and Luciano saw an opportunity to switch allegiance. In a secret deal with Little Caesar, Luciano agreed to engineer the boss's death in return for receiving his rackets and becoming Little Caesar's second in command. Adonis had joined the boss's faction, and when the boss heard about Luciano's betrayal, he approached about killing Luciano. However, Adonis instead warned Luciano about the murder plot. Joe the boss was killed at Nueve Villa, a Coney Island restaurant in Brooklyn. While they played cards, Luciano allegedly excused himself to go to the bathroom, at which point gunmen, reportedly Anastasia, Gavinci, Adonis, and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, entered the restaurant. And Sarah drove the getaway car, but legend has it that he was too shaken up to drive and had to be shoved out of the car seat by Siegel. With Little Caesar's blessings, Luciano took over Joe the boss's gang and became Little Caesar's lieutenant, ending the war. With Joe the boss gone, Little Caesar reorganized the Italian-American gangs in New York into 5 families, headed by Luciano, Profassi, Galeno, Mangano, and himself. Little Caesar called a meeting of crime bosses in New York where he declared himself boss of all bosses.